So let me ask you a question. Would you say that you've generally felt a little bit more agitated in the last year? Like, have you found yourself a little bit more agitated at the things that maybe didn't bother you before? Do you find it difficult to get on social media without walking away like you're ready to fight somebody? Maybe during the most recent political season, did you find yourself just getting angry with coworkers and friends or even family members over statements or their political opinions? During the past year, how often did you feel or find yourself getting triggered by something or someone? Now, if you answered yes or a lot to those questions, can I just tell you, you are not alone. I mean, look at all we've had to face during the past year. Public health challenges, economic strain, personal isolation, racial tensions, political divisions unlike anything I've ever seen before, paralyzing anxiety and fear, which has all led to explosive anger. I mean, it's no wonder why research has shown that people are feeling more angrier than they were a year ago. Now, if you don't believe me, then I want you to get on social media or read some comments on any news article, watch the news cycle or the political pundits. You'll quickly see that people in general are triggered and a lot more angrier now. As a matter of fact, last April, one national survey conducted to gauge emotional wellness in 2020 compared to 2019 found that among other categories like enjoyment, worry, and sadness, people who felt angry were around 15% in 2019, but that jumped well over to 24% in 2020. Now, the kind of anger we're talking about is the kind that leaves you strongly feeling annoyed, displeased, or even hostile. I'm sure you can think back over the last 10 months or so and remember a time when you were on the receiving end of such anger. I'm also sure that you could probably think back over the last 10 months and remember a time when you were the one dishing out that kind of anger. Now, let me stop right here and let me just say to you, anger in and of itself isn't a bad thing. It's a very real and raw emotion. It's not sin to be angry. You see, God designed emotions in many ways to be a signal to us. The emotion of anger can alert us to something that is going on deep within us emotionally and spiritually. And we need to pay attention to it because if we don't, we'll find ourselves exploding in unhealthy ways that could honestly cost us the things we love most in this life. Let me show you how anger works. If I were to take this bottle of water and I were to squeeze it from the middle, well, the water on the inside would come out and spray everyone in close proximity. So when I create pressure on the outside of the bottle of water, what is inside will come out. That's how our anger works. Someone or something creates pressure from the outside, and if there's enough pressure, we reach our breaking point. And what is inside must come out, and it will land on those who are closest to us. Now, you might be thinking, well, Michael, I don't have an anger problem. I rarely get angry. And I can understand that because it's kind of hard to see in ourselves. But let me be honest with you. We all do to some degree. I didn't think I had an anger problem. Then a few years ago, during a season of a lot of pressure and the loss of my father, I let my emotions get the best of me in a conversation with a friend. And our relationship hasn't been the same since, no matter how many times I've tried to apologize. And some of you are so angry right now. You're angry at politicians and their voters. You're angry at the news media. You're angry at protesters and rioters. You're angry at people who you don't agree with. You're angry at family members. I mean, you're just angry. And that anger is destroying you. It's like a wound that has never had a chance to get healed. And it's getting worse by the minute. And can I tell you, if you leave it unresolved, it'll destroy your relationships. It'll destroy your family. It'll destroy your friendships. And if you're a follower of Jesus, it'll destroy your witness. So the question that you might be asking right now then is, okay, well, how do I win the battle with my anger? Well, I'm actually glad you asked. Over the last few weeks, we've been in a series called Beats and Battles, where we're diving into the book of Psalms to find the right playlist to take us alongside of us in our battle with mental health. And we're using the greatest lyrical artist of all time, King David, to help us put words into actions that we need in order to fight our battles. And let me tell you, if there was anyone who could understand anger, it would be David. If you've never read his story, I want to strongly encourage you to do so. I fully believe that most of us could relate to what he faced in his time. In fact, I want to look at a playlist in which he wrote specifically for the anger he was dealing with. In one of his ancient poems, he writes this: "Be still in the presence of the Lord and wait patiently for him to act. Don't worry about evil people who prosper or fret about their wicked schemes." You see, David has two audiences he's focused on in this beat. He's talking to future readers and he's talking to himself. You see, at this time of the poem, he's a really old man and his time is coming to an end. But that didn't stop the injustice that was happening around him. During the last leg of David's life, he had to witness enemy nation after enemy nation rise up against his kingdom. One of his daughters, Tamar, gets abused by one of her brothers. And one of David's sons, Absalom, kills the brother and then flees. And then that same son comes back to try to take away the kingdom from David, only for David to be forced into war and eventually lose his son. And I don't know about you, but I can imagine that at some point, the outside pressure was getting strong enough that the anger had to come out somewhere. I mean, he's having to tell himself not to fret over the injustices, to not lose heart when bad people do bad things. And I can imagine for some of you, that's what it's felt like. Maybe you perceived a slight against you personally, or maybe it was a slight against a personal belief of yours and it angered you. You posted a comment on social media that was taken the wrong way, and now you're in a keyboard fight with someone on the other side of the country, and they're calling you all kinds of names. I mean, think about it. Maybe your kids are acting ungrateful about spending so much time at home and they're complaining. Your spouse is making unnecessary comments about something. The bill collectors won't stop calling. Your boss is asking too much of you. You name it. And you just feel like you've been backed into a corner and you're ready to explode. Let me ask you, have you ever heard of amygdala hijack? It refers to a personal emotional response that's immediate, overwhelming, and out of measure with the actual stimulus because it has triggered a much more significant threat. You see, for David, his circumstance of war, betrayal, and loss of the loved one triggered an amygdala hijack. Now, over the last 10 months, all of us have been through surreal events that we were thrown into, triggering a lot of uncertainty and fear. And we all know that when it feels like we've been backed into a corner, we often respond with a flight, we run, or a fight, we fight back mentality. And when we fight back with anger, our self-awareness and emotional IQ drops, and our unprocessed raw emotions get the best of us, and it often comes out sideways in explosive and destructive anger. I'll never forget back in 2012, it was a stressful financial time in our marriage. My wife was working late nights and providing most of the financial support in our relationship at the time. And I was watching some infomercial on TV about loans. And for some reason, I decided to pause the TV when they showed the fine print. Can you believe it? They were charging people 400% interest on those loans. So I decided to call and give them a piece of my mind. I mean, it's midnight and I wake my wife up going full throttle on a person on the other end of the phone because I thought it was reckless how they were doing business. You know, in hindsight, I'm still not sure why I was so mad or angry with the loan company, which honestly makes sense. You see, anger can be so confusing. I don't know if you know this, but anger has been called one of the most confusing emotions to understand. Now, one of the reasons is that most of the time, anger is not the first genuine emotion that comes over us in situations. Usually, there's a first emotion. And because we don't know how to handle that first emotion, we automatically jump over to anger. Think about your anger like a smoke detector. When it goes off, the problem isn't the smoke detector's obnoxious noise. That's not the problem. The purpose of the smoke detector is to tell us that something else is wrong, that there's a deeper underlying problem. So when David says that the alarm is going off inside of you, he says, be still in the presence of the Lord. Now, there's something so freeing when in the midst of our anger, we can come to God and we can say, God, man, I am feeling this pressure build up around me. And I know that what's inside of me is about to come out. And I can't do this on my own or without your help. I know what is inside of me will come out and it will do more damage than I want. So God, I'm going to give it all to you, Jesus. You see, David knew that outside of God, his anger would get the best of him, and it would ruin and destroy what he loved and valued most in his life. So he goes to the one place he knows that can sustain and even relieve him of that pressure, the presence of the Lord. Now, that begs the question, why is the presence of God so important in dealing with our anger? Because what you turn towards determines what you turn away from. Let me say that again. What you turn towards determines what you turn away from. Here's what I mean. At the root of our anger are three primary emotions: hurt, frustration, and fear. These are generally called first emotions. These are the emotions we feel initially when something happens, but because we don't understand them and how to respond from them, we immediately move towards anger. And here's what that could look like. Let's say the pandemic, has caused a financial impact on you, right? And you're not sure if you can continue to provide the lifestyle that you're currently at. So there's all this pressure, right? So now you have a short fuse with people. Why? Because you're afraid of what may lie ahead. How about this? Your spouse has been so angry lately. You guys seem to be fighting a lot these days. You're both working from home with the kids doing school from home. Things around the house aren't getting done. You're angry. They're angry. Why? Because you're both frustrated at the situation and the anger is sounding the alarm that something deeper is wrong. Or about this. Maybe you're angry at God. You lost a loved one. Someone you care about has gotten an unexpected diagnosis. Maybe your medical condition isn't improving. And you're hurt because it just feels like God doesn't care. Or you're just really in the grief. But you turn towards anger instead. And it's easy to turn towards anger because it's the one emotion that we falsely believe will free us from the pressure. But can I tell you, in reality, it's only pushing us further into it. And David understood this. He figured out that if he turned towards his hurt, frustration, and fear, he would only be turning away from God and the stillness that his presence brings. So he writes this: stop being angry. Turn from your rage. Do not lose your temper. It only leads to harm. For the wicked will be destroyed, but those who trust in the Lord will possess the land. You see, if you read David's story, I bet that you would believe he had every right to be angry at what was happening to him and honestly around him. But here he is pleading with himself and with you and I to turn away from the hurt, from the frustration and the fear, and to turn towards Jesus. Why? Because he understood that if he turned towards his anger, he'd have to turn away from his friends, from his family, from his nation, and most importantly, from God. When we give in to the pressure and to the anger, all we're saying is that my hurt, my fear, and my frustration is more important than my family, more important than my friends, and more important than God. What we turn towards will determine what we turn away from. And if I can be absolutely honest with you, the more you and I can turn towards Jesus, the more we can turn away from our anger. And at the end of the day, don't you want to be less angry? Don't you want to be less frustrated, less fearful? The only way to make that happen is by turning towards Jesus, by saying, God, I'm going to be still in your presence and let you deal with this pressure, because I know that if I trust in you, you will take care of me either way.